Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the 1040 Files. So good to be here with you today. I have a lot of useful information to share with you. Today is the unofficial start of golf season. Unofficial start of golf season? What does that have to do with tax? Oh, I can't wait to share this with you folks. You see, today is the opening round of the Masters tournament. The Masters tournament is one of the most storied tournaments in all of golf. It's held in Augusta, Georgia. And do you know there's a rule in the Internal Revenue Code known as the Augusta Rule? That's right. Comes from Code Section 280, capital A, small letter G. What the code section says is that if you rent your personal residence for less than 15 days, you don't have to pay tax on that income. What a deal. And you might say, well, how does this work? Why is it called the Augusta Rule? Well, many people in Augusta, Georgia, where the Masters is held, they clean up their house, they then leave it and rent it out, and they rent it out for less than 15 days. And when they do that, they get their money and they don't have to pay tax on that income. Now, it's interesting. People have taken this rule and taken it a step further, and they've applied it to their small business. Can they do that? Is it legitimate? You'll see a lot of videos touting this strategy, and it is a legitimate strategy. It comes from a private letter ruling, and this private letter ruling is from 1981. Now, one of the things you have to know about a private letter ruling is that it is just for that taxpayer, nobody else. But you and I can use this private letter ruling and say, if our facts and circumstances are similar, then maybe we can apply it to us. And so let's talk about what that private letter ruling said and what it was. Well, in this private letter ruling, the taxpayer was set up as an S corporation, and they were producers of commercials, TV commercials. Well, what they did is they would rent private houses. So they would go and they would rent a house from someone who had a beautiful house, and that person, they'd be there for a couple days, the person would receive their rent, and that person who received the rent, they'd get a 1099, they'd report on their tax return, but they could back it out. They didn't have to pay tax on it. And so the taxpayer thought to himself, I've got a really nice house. What if I rented my house to my S corporation? Would my S corporation get a deduction? And then I wouldn't have to pay tax on that income. And so the person's accountant said, let's go ahead, let's find out from the IRS. So they applied for a private letter ruling, which by the way is very costly. And what the IRS came and said was this. And I'm going to quote this straight from the private letter ruling. They said the payment of rent by the taxpayer to ... under the arrangement described above will be deductible as a ... and necessary business expense under Code Section 162A. Now, I find that wording interesting, ... and necessary expense. You see, what Code Section 162A says is that we can take deductions that are ordinary and necessary. What is ordinary and necessary? It's appropriate and helpful. This is saying ... and necessary. Is it ordinary? Is it necessary? And so what they said is that the fair value, rental value of the house for the use, deducted by the S corporation, and then the taxpayer wouldn't have to pay tax on that income. So there's a lot of TikTokers, a lot of people out there producing content similar to me who highly tout this rule. And it is a legitimate strategy that you can use. Let me start out by saying that. I would urge you to exercise a little caution. I'd say exercise a little caution. What's there to be cautious about? Well, what the IRS sometimes does is they come out and audit people. And when they come out and audit people, if they don't like the result, they can take it to appeals. And if they don't like the result in appeals, they can take it to tax court. And when they take it to tax court, we get to see the results of their case. And that's what happened here in the Sinopoli case. It goes back to 2023. And so what it was 3 doctors and 3 doctors started an S corporation. Within that S corporation, they started Planet Fitness franchises. And they had a couple different franchises. And one day, they devised a plan. They said, we have to have meetings regarding our business. What if we had them at our house? And what if we paid ourselves rent? And if we pay ourselves rent, and we do this from our houses, and each of our houses, it's less than 15 days, we get a deduction for our S corporation and income that we don't have to pay tax on. Sounds like a great idea, right? Well, a couple things happened. First of all, they came out and they said, in terms of rental value, they came with a number out of thin air. They used $1.83 per square foot. And they did this per house. Everybody had the same amount, and they started paying themselves rent. Well, so the IRS gets wind of this. And by the way, they didn't pay themselves just a little bit in rent. They paid themselves a lot of money in rent. In 2015, they paid themselves over $96,000 in rent. Divide that by 3. In 2016, they paid themselves over $110,000 in rent. Divide that by 3. And in 2017, they paid themselves over $80,000 in rent. Divide that by 3. Free money on their tax return. Sound too good to be true? Well, it probably is. There's a saying on Wall Street. Bulls make money and bears make money. But do you want to know what happens to hogs? They get slaughtered. Now, remember in the Sinopoli case, these are 3 doctors, and doctors make some good coin. And when people make some good coin, it might behoove the IRS to look at their return, because there's more money to be gotten from someone who makes a lot of money than from someone who doesn't. And lo and behold, the IRS selected their returns for audit. And the IRS auditor comes out and says, oh, I see you have paid yourselves rent for business meetings. Could you tell us when the business meetings were and what was discussed? Well, they had some problems coming up with that. And then they said, well, this amount that you're paying yourselves in rents, how did you come up with that amount? The IRS agent listened, and then the IRS went and did a little investigative work in their little area that they lived and said, you could rent a space for half a day that would seat, 1,000 people, 500 to 1,000 people. You could probably do that in the middle of the week for about $500. And so all of a sudden the IRS agent says, I think we got one. We've got someone that, first of all, I'm not so sure they can even take this because they can't substantiate their meetings. And second, we're going to lower this amount to $500 per meeting. And so this thing got reduced dramatically. And of course, the taxpayers didn't like it, so they took it to court. And guess what? The taxpayers lost. So folks, I would encourage you this. I would encourage you that yes, the Augusta Rule is a legitimate strategy that you can use. However, you got to use it with some caution. Don't be stupid is what I always tell my children. Just don't be stupid. And so if you're going to take the Augusta Rule, take a look and what does a rental space cost in your area? Then, actually have a meeting. And if you have a meeting there, document it, document what was discussed, and actually have a meeting. Do something along those lines. And then you've got yourself a legitimate deduction. One last note on that. If you have an S corporation and you're paying rent, you should issue yourself a 1099 for set amount of rent. You then take that rent, you report it on Schedule E, and then you can back it out on Schedule E. This way it makes it a completely legitimate deduction. So folks, all I can say is hit them straight. Next week we're going to talk more about real estate. If you've got any other topics you'd like me to talk about, any other suggestions, put them in the box. We'll be happy to address them, and we're always looking for good ideas. And with that, folks, go conquer your worlds.